Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready for the Wot Supp podcast. With your host, Stu OG Industry Shannon, and Will Warren Davey, new school formulator extraordinaire. We're talking all things supplements with insiders, athletes, experts, and more. So sit back, relax, and prepare to find out what's up.
All right, guys, welcome back. This is the Wot Supp podcast, episode 43 now. I can't believe it's been so many. We've had an amazing host of guests on, and today we have my faithful co-host and I having a bit of a catch-up, bit of a refresher after a little bit of an absence. But, mate, great to have you back on, Stu. Really glad to always get these episodes put together. What's been happening in your world, mate? I think today's going to be a great opportunity for a catch-up.
Oh, mate, look, there's been a million and one things going on. Obviously got the new baby at home, which is taken away plenty of my sleep. But yeah, I've been absolutely flat stick, which is probably one of the, and I know you have as well, Will, which is probably one of the reasons we haven't been catching up. Once again, I know we always say this every time we do one of these episodes. We got to catch up more. We got to get back to doing these regularly. But I've got had another store open since we last spoke.
Yeah,
and
that's an Albion Park, right? That's a big move, mate. And not just that, you're being modest, mate. You have a new store plus and a warehouse as well. You've changed where you're based out of, and from Kembla for 10 years in there, and you're now at a new location with your office and with a warehouse. That's big,
that's
mate.
right. I mean, obviously Port Kembla is still there. It's that's the flagship store, so that'll never go. That's always been my little baby. But down here at Albion Park now with the new office and the warehouse, and everything's sort of setting in a nice direction. There's obviously been a few speed bumps along the way, but what business doesn't have speed bumps? What
was it like, man, actually going from because I don't know if any of our listeners have actually been to the Kembla store, but if you see where Stu was dispatching orders out of for the last few years, space was not a luxury that he had, unfortunately, to do those, and I think. Yeah, finally having the opportunity now to go from a place that was, you had basically no room, and you had, like when I was in there, I'd always drop in and there'd be orders piled up all around the desk. You'd sort of build yourself in like an igloo of orders. And I suppose now you've actually gone and upgraded yourself and finally gotten that. And I remember on the last episode we had, that was we had a catch-up episode. You were saying that you were, just about to take the plunge and go for this next step up. So how's that process been, man? Because you've gone from it's like putting it out of the back of the store to actually, I suppose, backing yourself and going bigger again, So how's that been?
Look, I think it's one of them things, Will, like I had never really, I didn't have the foresight or the pre-planning, to build something that was going to be able to sustain the kind of turnover that the website's doing now. But I was in a bit of a catch-22. So in order to grow the website, I needed more space to keep the stock, but I also needed more stock in order to grow the website. So it was like I was stuck, and I think every business owner hopes that they can just organically upscale, but you can't. At some point, there's definitely platforms. There's points in which you have to jump. You have to make a leap and you have to take a risk and kind of not know if it's going to work or not. So
very comfortably too. I think that's a really good point, man. I think some of the best gems in these episodes usually come out of like some of the side notes, I suppose. But that's worth like fleshing out a bit. Is that the 100%? I think we all. I guess the establishment phase when people start up, and any listeners that are looking to start their own businesses and so on, there is if you're providing your product or service in a good way, you will see growth in the initial phases. And I guess for the first little while that happens at its own accord. You go from, small scale to slightly less small scale and so on. But you do inevitably hit these road bumps along the way where you get to a point where it's sort of, there's yet another leap of faith you have to take to get to the next level.
I think
right?
the next step up in the upscaling process is always quite a bit further than what you're comfortable jumping to. So it's like there's no space in between doing the back of my store dispatch to, like a 500 square meter warehouse. There's nothing in between that. It's like you're not going to go and add an extra 20 square meters. So it's like, all right, all out there, let's just put the money on the line. Let's pay this rent for a month and, see if we still keep growing when we do have the space to grow. And then, you're at another level again where you've got the big kind of national dispatch facility now. And it's like every single step up, I think, is a leap further than you're comfortable to take.
Oh man. And it's more, it requires, when you said people think they'll organically grow. Like, yes, if you're providing your value, providing your service, and so on does organically grow, but you have to be very purposeful, and sometimes even like be very conscious of how much you allow it to grow, because I suppose I've always just pushed it as hard as I can and grown as fast as I could, but that's made it the least comfortable possible ride it's ever. Like you just always broke, because if you're growing at an exceptional, if you're growing faster than your profitability and your business allows, you're at this constant deficit. Like if you're at a place where if you're like product, if you can, in a very simplistic term, if you've got enough profitability, if you sell one tub, you can buy 1.3 tubs, say. Well, then, but if you grow 50% that year, well, then you're constantly at this point where you're trying to replace 1.5 tubs with 1.3 worth of operational cash flow, so it's funny, people are at their brokest when they're having at their best. I think to hit that next
it's
stage,
funny too, Will. People will see Primabolics on the shelves of most good supplement stores now. It's stocked in big chains, and so I think probably the assumption is that whoever the owner of this brand is probably sitting in his penthouse pool somewhere on a flamingo-shaped floating device. But it's like these stretches, they stretch you further than you think. And each one that you're presented with seems insurmountable. Each new stretch, a new leap is just like, how am I ever going to afford that? You look at what the monthly cost of that's going to be, whatever the stretch is, and you go, I can't afford it. Even if it's just something as simple as I need to put on a full-time staff member to run my social media. That's a scary thing. And you go, wow, so I'm going to spend 50, 60 grand a year now on social media, which before was a zero cost.
Right. It's scary, man. It's scary
stuff.
And you'll see this with your warehouse. Then first you go warehouse, then you go warehouse staff, then you go from a casual then to a full timer, then a full timer and a casual, then two full timers. Then you're going, wow, I've got you got 100 grand in overheads just in people for just to pick and pack that you used to do yourself, but you can't do yourself now. And if you are, you're a bigger handbrake to the reason you are in a place where you need the warehouse and need the 2 staff full time packing orders. Like you're not there spent. That gives you back that time that you need to be where you need to be, right? But at the same point, you're so used to having to do it all yourself at the start that you feel that's the right place for you at that time. You might think for the first few years, well, I've always been the box packer. I've always been the guy who packed the orders myself. I've always been the one who's run the store myself and did the orders and did the website and did socials. And you've got a really good organic vibe on your page where it's always been very much, you're the face of Universal, right? You've always been in the videos, shooting them yourself, doing, you are the content, right? And I guess when you start businesses, for our listeners who are looking, who are business minded or who want to have a crack at it, that will be you wearing many, many hats the first few years. But you get to a point where you unfortunately have to sort of take a hat off and then allow someone else to step into that hat. And sometimes at great expense, sometimes at an expense it might be a justifiable expense yet, but it will be if you take the faith of going, if I take this hat off, I can put another hat on and go elsewhere. And hopefully that grows enough, and that so sometimes that direct expense is sort of has an indirect positive that leads to growth overall, right? But it's still scary as shit doing it.
Oh yeah, I mean, a perfect example of that, Will, with my website, it was doing reasonably well. And when I started my website, there wasn't as many players in the online space, and I was able to rank fairly well just through my organic SEO. So just through my use of key phrases in the copy on the pages, through good use of images and all the things that Google kind of likes to reward. I was able to do that just through knowing that stuff, and I was able to outrank your elite supses and your nutrition warehouses and this sort of thing, because no one was kind of in the know back then. But slowly but surely, everybody got digital marketing agencies behind their websites, and I was just getting kicked down the ladder. So the first time when I contacted a digital marketing agency to start taking care of that side of things for me, and it was going to cost me like $8,000 a month or something,
Oh,
I was just like,
wow.
this is like, how can I afford this? This is just crazy. And they said, oh, look, we can't make any promises, but we predict that through that $8,000 spend, we should be able to return you, $20,000 a month. And it was like, okay, well, now that's starting to feel a little bit more comfortable and make a little bit more sense. But at the start, for those first few months, you're not going to see that return, and you're just going to be forking out this money in good faith that the right move should lead to more revenue. And it's scary as shit, man.
Isn't that the delayed gratification, just the name of the game, unfortunately, in this space? And it's who's got the most patience, the willingness to put off that reward for as long as humanly possible, I suppose. Like it's we're still in a state, and I think as you keep scaling up as well, sometimes you accept, if you're going to grow, you delay that gratification even further sometimes as well in business. I suppose if you want to grow aggressively, that might mean, well, maybe I have to reinvest every cent back in this business for the next 6 months now to try and cover that growth period. And I suppose it becomes this hamster wheel at some points. But what I guess some of the business lessons I've learned in the last year or so, where it's really, I suppose, I've put on a lot more people in the sales team than I had previously. Got reps in different states now, and that was never the case. So as I've seen with the growth phase, you have these. I suppose it lines up with what you were saying before, the tiers, right? Where those different hurdles you'd hit. I had my national sales manager join in January, and that was the first time I'd sort of gone really, really heavy with going, all right, let's bring on someone with some experience and really have a crack. And it went from the business nearly doubled the monthly sales in it, and that was to grow that much in a like literally a quarter sucks because you've got to try and have double the amount of stock you'd like to have. But because we started doing, and wholesale, there's this big lag right between when you have to buy the stock. Factory takes 4 to 6 weeks to make it. You sell it to a retailer, they want 30 days on that. So you might have 3 months before you see cash, but you've already doubled your business. So you need double the cash. You need to pay for it up front, and then you don't see money for another 3 months. So there's this massive, it just creates this turmoil, right? And then I put another sales rep on, then another one on. Everything just creates this huge, amazing momentum and growth, and everything's prospering. But it's so funny to see you're at your most uncomfortable. But each time I put on, I had a new territory manager start, it sort of, I'd reach almost like this burnout point where I'd be like completely fried. It'd really test me to the max each time. You'd be like, you have to do bigger and bigger POs, going more and more risk, put in more and more scale and so on, and put in more and more staff to try and support this growing sort of thing. But it's you get to this point where you're almost about to break, and then you just sort of limp over the finish line, and you'd sort of equilibrate that next month and catch your breath, and then reflect on it and go, fuck, we just doubled, and managed to actually pull that off without or with purely just without trying to capitalize it heavily or bring on debt or do anything crazy or stupid. We actually managed to wing that, and it's come together. So you feel like you're gonna die just before it gets good. Usually, I think it's like that.
Oh yeah, I think that is probably a good description of of my life for the last 6 or 7 years. Is I live in a state of anxiety for probably 90% of the time, and then a state of like peace for about 10% of the time, and then the anxiety comes again. So I think that business and anxiety come hand in hand. If you don't function well in a state of constant anxiety, maybe just to do something different.
Choose a different hobby. That's a unique one, man. That's a really good way of stating, because you're right. Because I suppose you've got there's always something to be stressed about, right? And whether it's the increased scale of risk, and you've got a newborn, man. Congratulations, by the way. I didn't say at the start of the podcast. Congrats.
Thank you.
We haven't had an episode since then, man. That's a great life moment. And with that comes the extra responsibilities. Like you said, you're working on less sleep with more output, and then you've got business, and you've scaled up the business too, man. It's not like it diminishes. You get more resilient to the stress. So I suppose you get better at putting things to bed, I suppose, or at least that's what I try and do, is get better at letting things go and getting better at had more resilient to that stress. But it is hard. I see it, and I suppose a lot of my talks and seminars I do are on the adrenal space, on the impacts of cortisol chronically and the impacts of stress chronically on the body. And I almost wish, ignorance is bliss, right? I almost wish I didn't know what it does, because I see the symptom pictures playing out on myself, and it feels almost like hypocritical, where I'll sit in front of a room of strangers and tell them about the impacts of stress and how to fix it, and I know full well I can't. I'm like, if I want to run something at this scale, if we want to have a crack, and I think you sign up for this when I suppose social's glorified entrepreneurship, a lot. And I think a lot of people get this misconceived notion. But if you're signing up for this, you're signing up for, as long as you're in the game, you're going to be really running life, in sports mode. Really, like you're going to be right, foot on the gas more than you will have to be at almost any other pursuit until it's done. Either you choose to get off the wheel and you shut it down, or until it grows to a point where you can finally, hopefully have some support people around you and your team that can take some of that load off and help you sort of limp onto the next level up. But
Isn't it funny though? There's this strange phenomenon that happens, and I don't know if you've experienced this, Will, but many times when I was working and I always think back to when I was working as a landscaper. Many times I would think of people who were running their own show and had their own business, and I'd say how lucky they are. They're beholden to no one, and if I could only find some way to do a business that was self-sustaining and could pay me a wage, I would be happy. And then when you're in the most stressful moments, and you were talking about those moments when you almost think that you've got no more anxiety left to give to the universe, you think back to those days when you were working, when I was working as a landscaper, and I think, oh, wouldn't it be nice to just go back to that? And it's like, no matter which state you're in, you always think that it was better where you were, like there's been many times when I've been stressed out of my mind over the last 6 years that I've thought, no, it's enough of this. I'm just going to go to a 9 to 5. I don't care. I'll earn a little bit less money. I'll have a little bit less and I'll be happy. And then it's like, it's this crazy phenomenon. It's like, I don't know if maybe that's the answer. Maybe life, you're never supposed to be happy with where you're at.
Mate, well, I think it's like when you look at like the really high functioning guys who are really just crushing it in life, you watch podcasts with the Musks of the world and that sort of thing, and you see, I mean, they're not satisfied, and it's almost like a curse of theirs, right? It's also why they ascend the ladder they do, because they're not happy at any given point in the ladder. Now, does that mean that they're fulfilled and I suppose at a personal level truly satisfied with where they are? Well, maybe their curse is that they never will be, right? And maybe that's what they need to achieve that top tier, and it's probably a very lonely place up there, right? But I suppose, or maybe it's not. Maybe they've figured out a way to sort of hack their way around that. But I think it's very much, you see those people who have really hit top level, and people who've done, we're in the game for 10 years now. So then you look at people who've been in this for 15, 20 years and so on, and they're still running at that same pace. And you think, God, there must be almost something broken with people who are pursuing it at this level. I mean, not that we're not, but I think you've got to be dissatisfied with, or if not dissatisfied, just never content, I suppose, because by definition, if you are, you stagnate, right? You stop. You reach a level of contentment, and you go, okay, cool. This is me. This is good. But what I've tried to look at, like, get really granular on recently and really clear on, is what is the end goal, or what is success? What is the part, right? And I heard a really cool bit of content recently where this guy said, if you have an end goal, it's achievable. Therefore, at some stage, you'll achieve it and you'll stop. And he said, what you need is the end goal being nearly unobtainable, right? So it might even be, I want to end up on Mars or something. I want to build a. That
is Elon Musk's end goal, isn't it? End up on Mars.
Well, yeah, he's and look, admittedly, in that talking of Musk, he actually is doing it, which is, I suppose, I mean, talk about goals that you set that as your unachievable goal. He's going to do it, but you meant to set something that keeps you on this path of, like you said, Stu, never quite feel, you're always hungry to get there. But along the way, you've got to build in these little micro goals, I suppose, or little tiers, and sit back and smell the roses on the way, I suppose, and appreciate the goals you ticked off, getting to that massive, insurmountable one. So it might be, you might want to make, let's say, you might in your business, you might make Universe Supplements the biggest chain in the country, say, or the biggest chain, and then you go the next tier, you might go, oh well, maybe I want to be the biggest chain in New Zealand, say, and then you start there and you start at store one and you go through. So really, the goal would always shift, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs get to see this shifting goalpost. Do you find this in your business where you always
100%? And also, I think the funny thing is, I think back to, like, let's say 5 years ago, and the things that I was stressed about. Now I'm like, why was I stressed about that? That was such a non-issue, or even you look at the funny thing is the stress doesn't change, just the amounts of money or stock or whatever that you're dealing with change, but the stress level is still the same. So when Primabolics was a little baby and you couldn't fulfill an order of 20 units for someone, you were stressed out, right? And now it's the 200 units that you can't fulfill. The stress is still the same. It's like, but just the numbers have changed. And that's like, and when you talk to someone who's new, who is, their business is in that kind of juvenile stage, and they look at, like, for example, where you're at, and the numbers you speak about to them would just terrify them. And they'll be like, how can you like have that kind of, you know, how can you just be sitting here functioning right now with what's going on with those numbers that you've just spoken of? And you say, look, the stress stays the same. The numbers and the size of them increases, but the stress always remains. It's like an old friend, you know. I just sit there hand in hand with my stress now and just say, we're in this together, buddy.
I'm at peace with you now because
he's my oldest friend, and he'll always be there with me.
Isn't it funny? I've been shifting gears a bit more towards mindset stuff lately around business, because I suspect that the biggest handbrake for a lot of people probably is their own self-limiting beliefs at some stage, or your own baggage, or your own shortcomings as an individual. This is what I was sort of hinting at last night when I wrote a post about, I suppose, people like, you get to the person that you start with can't be the person who gets to where you want to be. If you've got this lofty goal where you want to be the biggest in the country, the biggest in the, you know, in the next country, or whatever your lofty goal is, chances are the person who walks in the room isn't the same person who can walk in the same room within that end result, right? Like the skills and things you need to get there are different, right? And
the personality is different. You know, like, I think that if the Will who probably started Primabolics walked into some of the pitches and business meetings, and you know, even just the social settings with the people that you need to deal with, he probably wouldn't be able to perform as well as the Will of today, and the Will of today probably won't be able to perform as well as the Will of 2026,
unless he dies of stress. Before then. But we
might talk about 2026. Let's deal with the next month.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good way of doing it, though. Like, actually, one of our previous guests had a good saying there on one of the episodes of having sort of macro goals and micro goals, I suppose. And the micro goal keeps you accountable in the day-to-day, right? Because I think self-employment is a real prick in that you haven't got someone else telling you what to do. In that landscaping business you were talking about before, you had someone giving you a directive, and you almost crave that at certain points when you're in business, because you get this crippling, like, no one's there to bail you out. No one's there to tell you, hey, do this, Stu, today, do this, and this task, and you're good. Then you can sign off, and you can check out mentally, and you've done what you're meant to do for that day, right? Mm-hmm. I think having those when you're self-employed, you have to become like incredibly good at giving yourself like structure and boundaries, because otherwise it just, one, never ends. And this was like really aware with like the whole, like obviously with COVID, a lot of people shifted to working from home for the last 2 years. And it's quite interesting because you'd think that would make it a more, I suppose that's more congruent with a happy, peaceful work-life balance, you would think, right? Working from home, surely you've got a better balance than having to travel to an office and commute and everything. Funnily enough, though, the rates of burnout are at their highest amongst employees, which is a really interesting thing. And I think it's because people we're so used to, I suppose, having that construct where you go somewhere for an allotted time, you're told what to do during this time, you leave that place, and then you can put that to bed in your head, right? Whereas I suppose when you go into this space, it becomes very tricky because there's no real clear. If you don't give yourself that clear finish and start line, it's really hard. So when people first start working at home or first start being self-employed, it's a really blurry area, right? When are you on? And inversely, when are you off? If someone texts you at 10 o'clock at night, are you on the clock? Are you off the clock? And does a clock exist because you're no longer, in those same
I think the other thing too is like there's something to be said for not keeping your comfort space or your safe space or your space of peace in the same place as your place of stress and your place of work and thought and problem solving and all this sort of thing. If you just force them together and squish them together, it's, you're setting yourself up for a fall. I think the other thing too is, as humans, we assume that we want total freedom. We want to be able to float around in a creek somewhere and eat fruit all day. But actually, we don't thrive on that at all. We become depressed and, we love structure and we need structure. And that's why, like, you look at people who are into fitness they're generally much more resilient as far as their mental health and stuff goes, not only through the fact that they're producing more positive brain chemicals, but they have definitive structure in their life. They're working to a program, right? They're, this is the muscle I'm working today. I'm going to the gym at this time. I'm coming home at this time. I take my shake at this time. I have my, my metabolize at this time and whatever it might be, but it's a very structured lifestyle, and we thrive on structure. We really do. We need these structured constraints to kind of keep us sane, I guess.
I've found that so much recently, man. I've found that so much because and it's called me out my own bullshit, I think, because I've always been a very chaotic person, I suppose. It just probably half because of the environment, like half nature, half nurture, I suppose. There's half environment because it's just a chaotic environment. You're used to always having shit blow up in business, but also I suppose I'm used to a certain degree of risk and instability. So I guess I've always been fine with operating just at the edge of my seat, not really having any structure, any set routine, any set whatever. Bodybuilding, that appealed to me, but I think in business now to this level, it doesn't let you do that anymore, because you get to a stage where you're like, if you just want to like operate under your own time frame and have no set meetings or schedules or times or anything, you're fucked, because it makes you do it. Like it's called me out my own bullshit now. I mean that I could get away with it until about now, and now it's like, no, you need to start planning this shit, because you have like if a month's booking out in advance now, you can't just wing it anymore and just go, I'm just going to wake up, see where I end up, or I'm just going to see what happens today and let the day happen to you. You sort of have to start putting things in place. When you said there, really interestingly, the routine part, I think that's the biggest appeal that people probably get from fitness. Initially, it's the like you said, the endorphin hit and the dopamine hit and the rush. But yeah, I think over time, you're right. If we had complete nothingness to embrace as freedom as a definition, you're right, man. We'd go insane. We'd go mental. We're meant to have a higher purpose. We're meant to have something to work towards. But what I'm trying to figure out is, like you had a post the other day about saying, you've earned your place of peace. You built this place of peace there. I think what it is though is trying to find out trying to find that golden ratio between how much time you spent trudging towards your higher goal and trying to ascend that mountain, and then how much time do you spend, sitting back and appreciating and recuperating and having downtime. What's that rest and digest versus flight and fight? What's that sympathetic, parasympathetic? What's that achieving goal versus spending time having downtime and appreciating and recharging your batteries and being grateful for it.
I think that probably the answer to that is going to vary from person to person. So and I definitely haven't found the balance myself.
Nowhere near, mate. We're both still going at this aggressively. You got a newborn, mate. You won't find it for a while.
Yeah. But I think the answer is somewhere along the lines of, if you find a place of peace, even momentarily, sit in it for as long as you need to until the battery bar gets to 100%, and then go back out there. I think that where we really get lost is thinking that the best thing for us is to sit in nothingness permanently. But you go brain dead. You look at people who have jobs that are high paying jobs, but they don't challenge their mind at all. Like you look at traffic controllers, they make a good wicket, but they hate it and they all leave traffic control. Why? Yep. Well, to me, one of the reasons is the boredom. That you don't want to just sit there without your brain being challenged. You have to ask a little bit more of it than I'm going to sit here with a cigar and a scotch for the rest of my days. You look at retired people and the rates of suicide, the rates of depression are enormous. Not so much suicide, but depression are enormous in retired people. And it's like, you've got to keep your brain ticking over. You've got to, it's there to be challenged, right? That's what keeps it functional and healthy and growing. And it's like the happiest retired people that I've witnessed are the ones who keep a little bit of, part-time work, or they have a hobby, or they start a little business at, 65 or whatever it is.
Yeah, of course, man. And the actual, it was really interesting, what the real, when you said your brain needs it, right? It does. It needs constant stimulus, because it was the work of Dr. Ian Mitchell, who I credit this to. He had a really great piece of content where he was talking about, they call it dendritic trimming. So you've got, I suppose, the neurons really thrive on, you've got, your brain has so much things it has to do in a day, right? So many tasks, has so many millions of things, like memories has to process, functions has to actually fire all of our neurons, contract everything, motor function, like cognition, everything, right? So our brain has these billions of tasks and billions of neurons to work with. And so what it does, it becomes very efficient, because our brain uses up something like 25% of our glucose, our entire body's glucose demands, and it only weighs like 1% of our body weight. So it's like this tiny organ compared to relative to body weight, and uses up a quarter of our entire glucose requirement. So it's incredibly expensive energetically to run, right? So this incredibly complex, incredibly inefficient energy-wise machine. Like, it burns through fuel like crazy to run it. So what it does is it tries to figure out what's the least amount of fuel I can burn. It means I'm only going to fire neurons and set pathways on things that we do regularly, we need. I'll only retain things that are essential for my survival, for purpose, for day-to-day things, and the rest gets trimmed. And what happens, they see with neurons, when you're learning a new skill, you're growing new neurons. But if you don't do something regularly, you actually these neurons start dying off. It actually kills off and starts, it starts trimming off these neurons that it doesn't require anymore. And I suppose to try and make room for it, so it's not firing everything, having to fuel the fire of everything your brain needs to retain. So it's very efficient. Once you stop, it very quickly starts down regulating. He actually he got tasked with the government. He's US based. He got tasked with government to help with dementia, right? His whole life mission was to cure dementia, which was until now it's been a seemingly insurmountable task. And he was putting together a lot of nootropics we play with as well, but also a lot of things that help. He was, interesting enough, I guess in the supplement space, we prescribe nootropics and say, just use this and go about your day. He was actually saying when he made a nootropic, he said, you have to do this, but at around about the 2-week mark, when you're, I suppose, at peak neuronal growth and you're starting to actually build new neurons and do new things, he said, go out and do new tasks, do new hobbies, try and read a book, read a language, try and do new things, go to new environments, go walk in different areas you normally would, just do different things to try and combine the nootropics with, I suppose, those new activities to stimulate the growth faster.
Yeah, challenge your brain and create a stimulus to go alongside this growth fuel almost.
Yeah, because you have to, right? Like everything in life is a balance between it's a responding to an imposed stimulus, right? Like you said it perfectly. If we just laid around the river eating fruit all day, yes, it'd be great, but you would never actually. The stress is what gives you the opportunity to evolve and get further, right? Like Jordan Peterson says that in the 12 Rules of Life. The end summary of that whole book, not to spoil it, I'm sure everyone's read it by now, is that you're meant to have one foot in chaos, one foot in order, and you need the chaos to force growth through its chaotic nature and putting that increased stress and increased demand on you. And then you need that time with your foot in stability and order. So you need the stress to give you the stimulus to respond to it and to grow, but in the presence of only stress and no time in that place of order and peace and tranquility, then that's where we have the issues. And that's where I normally find people in my adrenal seminars are people who have had chronic stress for years. They didn't have the catcher's mitt though, and then they end up with the autoimmune diseases. They end up with leaky gut. They end up with Hashimoto's and Crohn's or Graves, or end up with PTSD or trauma. All these things happen long term with chronic stress, and so it's sort of like you said, trying to find that equilibrium place to balance out whatever amount of you're putting on your plate, right? But what does yours look like? Do you have any Because I love.
Well, I think though that I think honestly, Will, that for me, part of finding that balance comes in the space that we work in every day, and it's like we have compounds that are natural, that are have stacks and stacks of clinical data backing them that we can use to help with this stuff. Now, I think it's kind of the old, like, you can't out supplement just a hugely stressful life. It's like I can take something that helps bring my cortisol down, but I can't just skip sleep and just do it that way, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of, for me, it's been a combination, like mindset stuff that's been like high on my priority list for years now. And I read books and I try and implement the things that I'm learning as best I can. It's like, I think it's always a matter of we would like to implement more of this stuff than we actually do. But so it's trying to do a lot of that, mindset stuff, mindfulness activities, the things that I'm being told this is going to help with your situation. But then taking the side of me that already knows about these amino acid compounds and botanical compounds and things that I can take that I know are going to benefit me, and, finding some sort of balance there. And admittedly, it's a work in progress. I haven't got the balance perfectly right. There's times when I'm ripping my hair out and I'm going, no, that's it. I'm done with all this. I'm selling up. Let's get out of this. And, then I'll come to my senses and I'll go, no, just relax. It's fine. Keep going. And I think that the other thing too, Will, is I think that having the blessing really of a history of failures and successes to look back at really brings me confidence that I will be able to get through. And I think sometimes our stress comes from our lack of confidence in our ability to master this task, or our ability to get through, or our ability to take ourselves over the line. I think people with the most confidence in themselves probably have less of that stress, because they say, oh yeah, I'll fucking do it better than anyone. But, you know, I probably sit a little bit more to the left of that, where I say, what if I can't? What if I can't come out of this? What if I can't, you know, make these, you know, these targets that I need to make in order to do this or do that? And it's that constant questioning of my own ability to get through that really brings me the most stress. But if I stop for a second and I look back at even the last 10 years, and I look at some of the things that I've managed to get through, and some of the things that I've managed to achieve, I go, history has proven to you that you always get through and you always do it well. Just trust that you're going to do this and get out of your own head. Trust that you're good at this and you'll come good.
It's a rugged one, that, isn't it? Actually, the self-doubt part of this, because I suppose everyone looks outward and go, oh, these, by the time they see us, it's like that whole overnight success thing is 10 years in making, all that sort of thing. You see, by the time you've seen someone in a particular position, you assume they're infallible. You assume they've got their shit covered. You assume they've gotten there, but they've just gradually worked up the ladder of stress, worked up the ladder of, you know, made enough mistakes, fixed them, made mistake, fix it, made mistake, fix it, fail, keep going, fail, keep going, long enough that they've probably, like you said, they have some idea of what they've done previously to do it. And it's interesting. Like I spoke to like one of our previous guests, like Matt Legg, who's the founder of ATP. He was someone who a naturopath for 20 years prior to this, and I suppose he was looking at when we're talking about, you know, supplements like adaptogens you can use that can help with managing stress, even if you can't avoid it, right? So, and a lot of people who are about to walk into a life of business, for our listeners, we've got a lot of people who love fitness and business. So a lot of guys who are listening on the business side, I suppose you can give yourself catcher's mitts for sure. And adaptogens are really cool herbs for that. You've got your ashwagandas, your rhodiolas, your schizandras, you've got your alloras, and you've got, you know, magnolia. And so you've got these really cool sort of herbs at our disposal that can help the body deal with the impacts of stress. But even this naturopath who'd been working for, 20 years, started one of the biggest supplement companies in the history of Australia. He was saying he's still tinkering around now with how to help, how to work with adaptogens and work with people and change dosages and work on, how to help people best deal with the impacts of how stressful lifestyles are now. He's been doing it for decades, and it's remarkable. And I think it's because our environment is so changing constantly as well. And I've seen it myself where I'll have to go through phases where, using like my adrenal product just before bed only and just focusing on really good sleep hygiene and trying to use that as my biggest buffer against stress has been my tactic for the last year or two. But then you'll get to a point where that stops being ideal because your body gets either adapts to some botanicals or maybe your daytime stresses increase, and maybe the place where you're most stressed is during the day. And so maybe lately I've been focusing on doing more during the day, but I've been using these herbs for years now and been had a product on the market for years, and I'm still figuring out what's the best way to help deal with chronic stress. And I try and adjust this in the seminars all the time. I'll talk on adrenals, and I'm always readjusting what I'm thinking on, because I'm like, well, like you said, so you can't get away from it, right? Like you know it's going to be there, and it's trying to figure out what's the most, what's going to help give me the biggest catches mitt, what's going to help protect against this, and knowing that it's there as a guaranteed variable, right?
I think that's such a cool point that you just made, Will, and this is something that I have been doing more recently as well, is finding new ways to take the same supplements that I have already known about and used and utilized for years. So same sort of thing. And it's such an interesting point that you made, because I've done the exact same thing. So what I do now, so I use cortidrine, which has got plenty of ashwagandha in it as well. I used to always use that before bed. That's kind of how I originally intended it to be used. And I found that it really helped me when one of my big struggle points was I would ruminate before I would go to sleep, right? I would think too much and run things through my head and run worst case scenarios through my head. That's one of my something that I do really, really well is come up with the worst case scenario for things. Which is
cortisol 101, mate. 100% it is. That tight, it's being mental.
Make mountains out of molehills. But I would always take it before bed, but I've discovered in more recent times, especially just because I have been fairly exhausted from having the newborn, getting to sleep isn't so much of a problem for me now. And I'm actually sleeping quite well. My stress has more been through the day. So taking my Cortidrine in the morning has really helped to, I guess, alleviate some of that through the day, and just using the same product at a different time, it's doing something totally different for me. And it's almost like I have a second product now, like,
Cool, isn't it? Using the
it's
same
really cool.
Same wheel in different applications. It was because I saw this when I had actually I was really quite ill recently. I was meant to be in Victoria last week doing a string of seminars, and unfortunately I got really sick and I had to cancel. But I was looking at my I got a Garmin as a wearable device that tracks all sleep and tracks deep sleep, REM sleep, and stress as well. So it looks at like respiration rate, heart rate. It looks at I suppose heart rate variability as well, and it sort of puts these together and your body battery, or like a number it gives you for how well rested you are. And it puts it together as a stress reading. It shows you throughout the day, and it follows the cortisol curve quite nicely. But the interesting thing was when I was sick and my sleep was disrupted, the stress throughout the night went high as well. But the next day was crazy. So I went from like normally the curve might go high in the day and then low at night. Well, it just was basically just high all the time. It was and what I saw was the big flow-on effect of having that. Even after only a few nights of broken sleep, the daytime stress afterwards massive. That cortisol output the next day would have been 30% higher. Like the score they gave me, I think the average before was sitting like 25, so pretty low stress relative to it. And then you put it the next day, broken night's sleep, wake up, and it might sit at 75 the whole day. And you go, wow, this is triple the amount of stress my body would be under normally from this one bad night's sleep. And so I've started doing the same thing. Then I start throwing in these adaptogens throughout the day. So I got Restore's pretty hefty dose, like 600 megs in 4. So I use like one capsule, say 1 to 2. If I've got a lot on, I'll use 2. Like when I was having that crappy sleep at night and I knew stress was high, I'd use 2 in the morning and 2 at lunch. And that really dropped it down. Like my stress rate after that was back down to like 30. So I got it back to pretty much baseline from a typical good night's sleep. But it's so weird. Yeah, I had that thing out for years and I hadn't really played with daytime use a huge amount because I found that if I had a good night's sleep, my stress reading was pretty low throughout the day, but even relative to what the environment was doing. But that was a really cool, like flipping reset. And only in the last few weeks, I've started doing that daytime stuff. And in light of talking to Matt, and he going, actually, man, some people if your lifestyle changes, or some people they stop responding as well to nighttime use after a long time. So he puts them on daytime use, and it's like instead of letting your cortisol get so high that by the time you get to bed, your head's racing, like you found, that you're tired physically, but your mind's just racing. That tired but wired feeling is it won't be there because you've already dampened the cortisol before it let you get tired but wired, right?
Yeah.
So,
and isn't it cool though now that we have these devices where this stuff is measurable for us as an individual? We don't need a lab. We don't need to, run a trial with, 200 healthy individuals. We can literally wear a device or a watch and see changes, and it's just so cool that we have technology that can do that, because it takes some of the onus off you and I to try and convince people at seminars or whatever. We can say, look, you've got a Garmin or you've got a Aura ring or whatever it is. Here, try this and tell me what your readings were. And it's just a really exciting time to be in this industry because, the proof of effectiveness is able to be shown with data for the individual, rather than what we had once upon a time was, don't you feel better? Don't you feel like your sleep was better? And then, obviously, I think that we all have a tendency to want to put everything up to coincidence. It's like I've seen it before. I've had customers take, an adrenal product or Cortidrine or, whatever it might be, and they feel 100 times better. And they come in and I say, you're feeling good? And so I'm feeling amazing. Oh, but I don't know if it was the product that did it. It's like, what could I have possibly done to have you feel that it was the product? You came in, you were stressed, you weren't sleeping well. I gave you this product. Now you aren't stressed and you are sleeping well. And you say, I don't know if it was that did it. It's like, how could I have proved this to you? What were you expecting of it?
It's my area of passion, this topic, mate, because and that's what I've pretty much dedicated my life's work to these last few years. And I'm trying to think of how to get it to a bigger audience, like just awareness of the impacts of this stuff on your body, on stress, because we're all going to have to deal with it now. It's a fixed variable for everyone. It used to be more so, maybe it was just your high charge business people. Maybe it was, people running big teams. It was leaders. It was, I suppose. But now it's sort of everyone especially with the last 2 years in mind of just massive uncertainty, massive not knowing how the environment could change tomorrow. And no one would, no one would bat an eyelid because they're so used to just turbulence, right? And inflation and war and all this stuff going on. So you see now it's like a guaranteed variable across anyone is a certain degree of high stress. And so I've really been trying to figure out ways, and that's where I think we're so fortunate to have built this podcast as a vessel of how to get people to really want to look a bit deeper at the impacts of stress and the chronic, I suppose, giving them the best tools they can. And that's the beautiful thing about supplements. We can build these, we're not allowed to say therapeutic tools anymore, but these things that actually help people in a meaningful way. You give them a catcher's mitt against an unavoidable modern lifestyle we lead now. People have got so much on their plate. We live at such a fast pace, and it's trying to give them things so when they are laying there at night, they can't switch off and their mind is just racing, thinking about what I should have done today, what I've got to do tomorrow. I should have sent that email, should have made that call. They can switch that off. Giving someone that deep restful sleep, giving someone that ability to recuperate, have the next day, and wake up and not go, oh fuck, another one. And actually wake up and go, how do I thrive, not just survive? And that's become. And I always try and find ways of getting in front of more and more people and trying to pass this on. And try and raise awareness around it.
100%. And it's something that, like, I'll talk to people like daily who have never heard of adrenaline, who have never heard of cortisol. They've heard of the term stress, but they don't know that it's associated with specific hormones and, biochemicals. So, for them, it's all just situational. And they don't understand that there's more to it. Like, there's more to it than just the situational stuff and your, immediate reaction to it. This stuff is having an impact on your overall health, on your gut health, on your, hair, skin, nails, on your, there's just some wacky connections on your dental health. Like, it's like, we have pathways. Everything's interconnected. We're a holistic being. Like, you've got to get this stuff right or you're going to be in big trouble.
It is. And I think probably the next frontier, because I think we're very fortunate the industry is finally waking up a lot about we have a lot more, like, people have got access to information now. They're educating themselves more than ever before. And they're coming in asking questions with a lot more higher caliber questions than we ever have seen in stores, right? I'll be at a seminar and people will come up and be like, oh, look, I've got these thyroid issues. I'm taking thyroxine, but I want to have a look at what supplements I can use to help as well. And you're like, wow, this was not a question I would have gotten asked a few years ago. People didn't even know what a thyroid was to ask a question about how it's dysfunctioning and getting bloods and looking at supplements. And I'm like, this is really cool. Like, people are, a lot more, I suppose, like, they're more educated. They're reading more, and the access to information is more than it ever has been before. So I'm optimistic into the industry, into where it's going to go. And I think looking forward at what might be the next big frontier, I think that, like you said, where this one holistic being, and I guess we look at in traditional medicine, you look at the different axes, right? You got the HPT axis, so you like hypothalamus pituitary, you got the thyroid axis, the adrenal axis, the gonadal axis, and even now look at the gut brain axis. I think the gut is going to be a big area. The next frontier, right? They've been slowly building research on it for the last 20 years or so, and it's getting we still know bugger all about it, but it's this incredible, fascinating, poorly understood, incredibly impactful part of our physiology. And I think that, like, they're finally starting to term it the gut brain axis as an actual recognized axis and part of the bigger way they're going to treat people, and how your microbiome responds to your environment and to what you ingest and how it metabolizes those things is so impactful on everything: mood, digestion, on health, on metabolism, on hormones, on all of it, right? So I don't know, if we're looking at like where it might go, I think gut is going to be the next big frontier, right? I think that's the likely big area we're going to see go next.
Well, I think that it's hard. It's hard for, like, my thing is this. I think that people sometimes have a tendency to focus more on things where they can see a physical metamorphosis, so I think that you'll always see muscle building and fat loss leading the charge, right? Because people want to see, I've spent my money on this and my physical body, the outward appearance of my body has physically changed. So I think they will always lead the charge. And then you've got these kind of other little guys in the race that should be bigger than what they are, because ultimately they're going to have an impact over time on the outward appearance. but they're kind of like down here, sort of, vying for leading position. You've got, your aromatase inhibition type things, or hormone modulators, whatever you want to call them. You've got your test boosters over here, and you've got your adrenal products over here, and you've got your gut health products back here at the moment.
Yeah.
And, there's just, and they're all kind of like, look at me, I need some attention too. But people are going, no. Give me just load me up on creatine and protein, and I'll be good.
Right.
Or, give me as much stimulant and thermogenic as you can. Like, people want to see something that I take and I strip down like a meth addict, like
The big stimulant trend, I think, is finally, I like to think it's finally waning. I think we are lucky, though, in that we are a felt effects type industry. Everything we make now, we're very fortunate that you can make a product and you feel it, right? Like, we're not, we're very, very fortunate in that regard. I think with supplements, I'm always blessed that you can give something to someone and they'll feel it. They'll have better digestion, better sleep, better mood, less stress, whatever it is. And I think that's a really, really valuable thing. And I do think, unfortunately, that means sometimes the felt effect is the only perceived benefit of something. Like, I'm rebuilding Metabolize this will be the third rendition of it. And I'm treating it like a complete overhaul, like a complete start from scratch. How would I formulate now versus the 5 years ago when I made it the first time? And keeping that low stimulant theme, it still feels risky now, even though it feels risky, right? And it's like, it's so dumb but it's still the thing. People have it and go, that's a strong fat burner. Like, strong why? Because it's got 350 calf. Is that really what you're looking for? Like, it's strong in that you can't sleep now for the next 2 days. It's strong in that, yes, you feel wide off your face and you're jittery and you're anxious and stuff. But is it strong in terms of actual fat loss, actual metabolic rate, actual tangible increases in fat loss? Like, no, it's strong in stimulant. Go buy 2 Red Bulls from the servo and you've got your strong fat burner.
My product, Thermodrine, Will, 0 stimulant fat burner. One of the few out there, and it's my lowest turnover SKU by far. Is Thermodrine. No stimulant, just, thermogenics, metabolism boosting ingredients, thyroid support, all this stuff that, you would think people were focused on, but because the only thing that you feel from it is you're going to sweat a little bit more. People go, oh yeah, but I get that from this as well. This one with 350 milligrams of caffeine also makes me sweat. And I'm like, yeah, it does, but it doesn't have this, and this, and it's not dosed in this correctly. And, but it's like, well, we don't care. Like, so basically, I think if you put 350 milligrams of caffeine in a protein powder, it'd be the top seller.
It's remarkable, isn't it? People are looking for, like, I always get fascinated by that. People, I suppose, and one of my biggest things that I've done to shift the needle, I suppose, is get very acutely aware of my caffeine consumption when I'm trying to manage stress and how it goes in my body. And now I've got wearables that can track stress reading. You can see it with stimulants. Like it's a transient effect. You have a coffee, or you have that one too many, you have that extra thermo in the afternoon that you shouldn't have, and you see it, and it might go up 20-30% and hold there for the next 3 hours, and the mental arousal is gone because you've down-regulated that effects to caffeine. That stimulatory effect might not be as obvious, but the background CNS is still being stimulated by the adrenaline release and the cortisol. And I suppose, so one of the biggest hacks for people, I think, that are listening that have got a bit of, if some of that stuff we've been speaking about for the last half hour sounds familiar, is probably even just being cognizant of how much caffeine you're consuming. Like, studies are sort of showing that 2 to 4 milligrams per kilo is the ergogenic sort of dosage in an application. I use that as a bit of a daily guide, is how I use that, I think. So 100 kilo person, 200 to 400 milligrams is a really generous sort of allowance, where you sort of like, that should be enough to get most people through a big day, fingers crossed. And start applying that threshold to, because people track calories, or they track macros, they track steps, whatever, but they don't track caffeine. No one looks at caffeine, and it's like the easiest lever you can pull in the room, right, of lowering stresses. And immediately, like, if you want to lower stress now and feel better now, go from a 200 milligram caffeine, down to 100. You're still getting a bit of a kick, but halve your caffeine for the day and see what it does to sleep, to mood, to digestion, and see what happens. It's massive, right? And good on you for doing a non-stim, man, because that's the hardest road ever, right? Like, that's it's such a brick.
Look, I've considered dropping that line many times, but I refuse to. I'm trying to force it down the market's throat, and the market won't have it.
It's a funny one.
Yeah,
I've been looking at this with Nubitab. I've genuinely thought the most Puritan approach to helping, because it is essentially a thyroid tonic, right? Because I'm looking at what's genuinely increasing caloric expenditure in people. Everyone's looking at the the 10% of their daily calorie burn is coming from exercise, or even in elite athletes, it might be 20% of your daily calorie burn is coming from exercise. The other 80%, 80 to 90% in Gen Pop, 90% is coming from resting metabolic rate, daily activity. And I suppose that basal metabolic rate is all thyroid related, right? That's what's setting, that's the body's thermostat. So if you've got, if you look at a pie diagram and you've got 4/5 of it is being used, is burning regardless of that little bit of exercise. But everyone's chasing products that are going to, thermogenics that'll boost your calorie burn during that 1 hour of training, or get you burning a few more calories during your hour on the treadmill. It's like, well, you're all missing 80% of the picture when you're looking at that. And a lot of people are doing this stuff because we've got busy lives. They'll do cardio after work, say. They'll take their 300 megs caffeine at 5 p.m. and then wonder why they don't switch off. And it's like, I really wanted to put metabolize out as a non-stim altogether. And I've wanted to for a while. I still know that people want a felt effect.
I'm telling you, don't do it. Well, hey, look, I think one of my problems as well with Thermodrone though was, or is, that I've gone for function over flavor. And I just don't think you can do that in 2022, or not entirely. You can't really throw yourself entirely into function over flavor. You have to really make sure that it tastes good. And that's something that, I like the taste of it. I think that it's nice, but it's not unicorn tears. You know what I mean? Like, it's not up with some of the other things on the market now. And something else I find interesting, Will, is this flavor thing, getting these flavors to this exceptional level that we're getting them now. This is an Australian thing. You taste these things out of the US, they don't taste like the Australian brands now are really leading the charge for flavor. And the consumer expects that now. The consumer expects it to taste amazing. And hey, it's like you can dig your heels in and get upset about it and say, no, you guys don't understand this. This botanical tastes nasty, and you're just getting the taste of that on the back end. The consumer doesn't care if you say that. They want it to taste like, they want their protein powder to taste like a McDonald's thick shake, and they want you to do a McDonald's thick shake without any calories, without any fat, and without any carbs. And it's like, well, sorry, but that's what we want. It must taste like a McDonald's thick shake, and you have to do it with no sugar, no fat, no carbs, and no calories.
It's such a hard thing, man. I had this chat with my reps recently, actually. It was really quite funny. We're talking to the sales team, and we'll have our weekly call, and all four of us will sort of start pitching ideas and stuff. And you find I've realized that when I'm doing R&D on products now, my palate's somewhat irrelevant, because both you and I came from the era of, I suppose, things tasting like battery acid, but working really well. But now it's this stage where I suppose my palate's almost irrelevant, because I'm far more forgiving after doing years of straight herbs and the stuff the things that we've accepted in supplements previously, and then just working with straight extracts and herbs now as well. I've got basically no bearing on what's acceptable now. But if you look at the huge standard that the consumers expect of us now, and we're lucky in that we are, you're right, like Australia's leading the charge. The Aussie independent brands are really bringing out premium products. They're more conscious of their formula than ever, because consumers are more educated than ever. It's a very competitive space, and that's encouraging more and more, like, I suppose, like even the non-stim space, right? Like, I've grind out for 5 years, and I'm still impressed now that people are starting to really level up their formulas in that space. Like, there's actually some really big, brands are starting to put out really good attempts at a non-stimulant pre-workout. Whereas before it would have been some citrulline, some glycerol, and maybe just stuff for pump only, no nootropics, nothing for endurance, nothing for power, power output. And now they're starting to level up. So the formulas are getting better, the flavors are getting better, and the industry is really trending towards this, like, just pinnacle of perfection, right? I think of making these all around, like, we've really got super subs in the Aussie industry. Like, things are really at this pinnacle, right, of like flavor and formula and efficacious doses, and the consumer demands it, and it's making us jump higher, and it's cool. Like, the industry's really just leveling up. Like, nothing gets released now that's substandard, because it just gets eaten alive.
It's hard though, isn't it? It's hard as a formula. Like, there are some ingredients are going to really limit the kinds of flavors that you can do that in. And this is the other thing that the consumer doesn't necessarily think of, but it's like, there might be one botanical compound in there that you're going to have to make it citrus flavored. You're not going to be able to make it a lolly flavor, because you just can't swing that flavor into the lolly realm. And they're like, why don't you release that in a Red Frog's Chuppa Chup, gummy worm flavor? And you're like, we're really, our hands are tied with this product. It's like, we're down the citrusy, we have to be down the citrusy route, or, there'll be other products that you can make them taste like a cola chuppa chup or whatever it is. But like some products, if you're really have your heart set on having a specific compound in there, your hands are tied as far as the range of flavors that you can actually kind of
1,000%, man.
out to.
I did that with the metabolites. Now I've started doing that in the last few products I've built. I've stopped telling the factories what flavors I want, and now I'm letting them respond with what will suit the formula, because I've tried masking it, I've tried nuking it, I've tried doing as much as in all these different ways over the years. When I worked with the US guys, it was like 20% flavorings I'd add and just crush things, right? Then come back here and I've gone the opposite way and done only stevia and it's been like 3%, excipient, and it's like this incredible. Like with the last metabolizer was pretty much just purely the powdered botanicals and no artificial colors, no like minimal sweeteners, just basically the straight herb. It's the most Puritan attempt at a fat burner, right? So I've gone both ends of the spectrum, and like the aminos have now gone no artificial colors and naturally sweetened as well. So it's just purely amino acid in a tub with the smallest amount of flavor you can use to get that premium formula in the consumer, right? And I think now I've started changing that recently. I've gone, like you said, hey guys, this is my formula. What will suit it? And that's made the R&D process heaps quicker. But it's for so many years I would try the whole. Let's make this taste like great bubble gum, and you're like, have you seen what's in here? They're plant roots, they're tea leaves, you're basically trying to make mud taste like grape. It's not, this ain't fun. We don't want to work with you anymore. That's how I've evolved recently too as a formulator, is work around that space of trying to, all right, this is particularly like the new metabolites. It's got citrus bioflavonoids, it's got polyphenols, it's got tea leaves and bark and roots and herbs, and like it's a really, it's a real prick of a raw material to work with, but it works phenomenally in the beta testing. And I was like, I need this thing to come to market, but it has to be, I've learned now, because of this high demand of the flavoring standards, it also has to taste like angel tears, despite being basically, like really, really beneficial mud. So it's been a killer, but it's really interesting. I think that's a good trend. I think like that, where I think we're seeing consumers are more educated, people are more aware of things, they're demanding a higher standard, they're reading into what's going into their body more so. They're probably listening to their body more so since COVID as well, I think, and their health is a bigger picture. And I think the market's responding in kind. I think the market's going really big and leveling up in a lot of ways. And those who aren't, I think it's almost like Darwinism as well. I think the people who are products out there who aren't real screamers and aren't really leading the charge of doing something innovative or have underdosed something or cut corners, they're not really thriving in the current market.
There are brands falling off. I'm noticing that, especially in the last 2-3 years. Like we saw kind of, I think, the rise of Australian contract manufacturer, like maybe even 4 years ago, was where we finally had like some selection with Australian contract manufacturers. And you had, there's a decent selection of Australian contract manufacturers now, but every man and his dog wanted to do a brand. And I think that there's really been a separation now of the good formulators and the poor formulators, or the people who just went at it with not much idea. Those brands are now starting to fall off the market. And I don't think we will see as much crazy charge towards everyone doing a brand anymore, which I don't think is a bad thing for the market. I think you're always going to have market competition, which is important. It keeps people on their toes. I think that we got to a point where it was over the top, and you were seeing a brand launched every 2 or 3 days.
It was crazy there for a while.
Most of my phone calls for a period there were not customers. It was just, hey, I'm Jeff from Wacky Joe's Nutrition, and we're a new brand, and we're going to be market leaders with our new pre-workout amino acid protein and blah blah blah. I'm like, who the hell is Wacky Joe's Nutrition? It's just like
it was a massive trend. It was, but trimmed them. I suppose the market is a ruthless place in that it doesn't care about what your intentions are. It cares about, does your stuff work, right? And I think that's why I think it's taken me so many years to get where it is. I took the sort of slower road, but I knew it would pay off eventually. Like doing these formulas are so fucking expensive the way I formulate, and the factories always send it back, and they're like, dude, this is like 30% more than anything else in this category we make for the other brands. What are you doing? Like, do you want to trim this and save $1 here? Do you want to trim this, save 10% there? But you just do it, and I've done it for years now, and it takes forever, it feels, to get any sort of runs on the board that way, but it's a more earnest way. I think as a retailer, you'll appreciate it's, I suppose, the way that we work together in a symbiotic relationship of a brand and a retailer is that it's on your end to suggest our product once to the customer, to get in their hands the first time, and maybe give them a few key points on why it might be beneficial. But it's my job to create a product that will actually benefit them so much they'll buy it a second time. So if you don't have a product that works, i.e., if you cut corners on the formula, it won't have the result you need. Therefore, they won't buy it twice. Your brand, eventually, you'll decline in sales, and eventually the market will just let you know that you need to either level up or bow out, because you're not giving the customer what they look for. And you've been really good at coining this term before, where it's like they come in asking for fat loss, and sometimes you have to give them the felt effect first sometimes, or give them what they're asking for first before you earn their trust to do the second thing. It's like I'm very conscious of that when I'm formulating. I'm like, this has to give exactly what they're expecting, but then it also has to have the flow-on effects of doing what it actually promised, or they won't repeat by it, and then you'll see it stagnate, and you've got to, and I think that's with brands, I suppose. There have been some corners cut and formulas that were put out. There's a very bland period there with not much innovation going on, and nothing too overwhelming, particularly in the pre-workout space. I'm not seeing a huge amount of advancements in the pre-workout space.
Well, I think the pre-workout space is a hard space because we're very, very limited with what we legally can put in them. And so it's like I think that some people have stretched out a little bit and gone out into the space where you are with grind. But unfortunately, for those guys, I think that space, like, this is my personal opinion as a retailer. I think that space is done very well. The market only demands a certain amount of those products on your shelf. So for me, for every 5 tubs of pre-workout we sell, 1 is a non-stim. And that's not through my doing. I try and put as many people onto non-stims as I can. That's just what the market's doing. So that means that if I have 5 products on my shelf, only 1 product is a non-stim. Now, we've just recently, I've seen another one of the popular brands release pump formula. I know Faction Labs does a pump formula as well now. There's a few that have come out with pump formulas, but unfortunately, I can't stock them because to do that, I would have to remove grind. And to me, they haven't met the mark of grind. So, like, that I removed Big Noise to bring grind in. And so unless someone brings something out that really knocks my socks off and to me smashes, like when I take it, I get a better pump than I do on grind. I get better focus than I do on grind. I get, better endurance. It's not going to go on the shelf because I just don't have a market for it. If I see in every 5 pre-workout sales, 2 of those sales are non-stim, I'll bring another one in and I'll drop one of my stimulant-based ones. But my range is based on what the market is telling me.
5 to 1, interesting ratio too. I think that's probably about right, because as a brand now, particularly because I've done so much work in the adrenal space and trying to make people aware of stress and the more holistic approach to things with hormonal balance and so on. I'm not a high stim brand, right? Like the new Metab's only going to be just over 100 milligrams per serve caffeine. My pre-workout's a non-stim, which is was blasphemy for the last 5 years. And now it's becoming acceptable, but it's been a long time. But I know the easy market would be just launch a high stim pre and I'd sell out, right? But I'm trying to. I think brands have a very big obligation to their customers and their followers, that people who have believe in their mission statement and identify with the brand. You have to stick true to your virtues as well, right? Like, you wouldn't, if you've got a brand of hormonal products behind you with quartadrine and with the estradiol and so on, and then put out a high stim burner in there, it would be disingenuous, right? And I think brands have sort of done this previously, and they see very quickly what the market believes of it, right? And I think I'm the same. I think
too, it does take away from your integrity. And I think part of your brand image is its integrity. So, and people can see what you're doing. It's like if you release a product that looks, feels, tastes like OxyShred, people know you're trying to be OxyShred. If you release a product that, has a half red, half black tub in your protein, people know you're trying to be gold standard whey. It's like you lose your brand integrity if you start trying to chase what someone else is already doing the best. So to me, it's like, do your thing that you've been doing that made Primabolics what it is. Primabolics was able to exist in a market of giants when it was tiny because it was totally different. And I think that's really why it's been able to now grow up to the point that it has. And obviously with you leading the charge. But
it is, and it's a slower grind, right? It's the more appealing one is to take the easier road, where you can just, put out the high stim products to people. The market wants it, right? Like you said, 5 to 1. There's 5 times more demand for a stim than a non-stim. I could make 5 times the sales, arguably. But it's just not what it's. There's a short road and a sustainable road, and I think integrity is the big part of that's got a higher value than what the extra sales would do at the end of the day, right? Like that's really all you've got in a flooded, over competing space. Is you as your brand has to have those strong core values, or the customer very quickly loses faith in it, right? Like, I think people are looking for beacons of, I suppose, virtue in a otherwise, fleeting world in a lot of ways.
It's like the last bit of hope we have, the last good thing we have is the integrity of our supplement brand.
I guess the rest of it's gone.
There's nothing left. It's apocalypse. The only thing we had left was the integrity of our supplement brands.
And what a hilarious note to finish on, mate. I think that's a cracker one. I'm so glad. I love these episodes when we get a chance just to have us on here, because we're going to have we've got a half a dozen really good guests planned for the next sort of 2-3 months. So I think it's really good to get an opportunity just to have a good catch up, talk about what's happening in the industry, what's changing, how both of our businesses are going, learn a bit more about business and supplements, and yeah, man, I think it's always a pleasure to be able to just have these nice catch ups ourselves before we throw on some big names in the next few episodes.
Beautiful. Thanks for having me, Will. Enjoy yourselves, and we will see you on the next episode.
Beautiful. Thanks for listening, guys.